Well, hi everyone. Thank you for joining us. There's quite a lot of spare places. I thought I'd be telling people at the back that there was a few at the front, but there's plenty of spare places. Hold the microphone closer to your face. Thanks for joining us. Welcome. Good afternoon. This is a session on finances and benchmarking. I'm Paul Christian, and like most of you, I've got a real vested interest in regen farming. We got into it. We like it. It's enjoyable. I want to get it right, and I want to scale it up and see the benefits it can bring. It's got different meanings to different people. That's becoming a cliche. In this room and in this event, there'll be people who are well indoctrinated. The systems are working on their farms, ranging right back to people who this is the very first day that they've ever stopped to think about it and see how it might fit their business. So the percentages, the statistics would be quite interesting to know. But if this show is anything to go by, and I'm told 600 to 6,000 people in 6 years, or something like that, that gives you a good indication of the direction of travel that we're in. And you can't buck the market. I think it was Margaret Thatcher that said that. And the market's also very interested in regen farming. Have we found it easy as a company, and the company I run? No. We found it challenging, but we're finding it easier. And we can see plenty of the benefits. All starts with the soil. The soil's complex. If you've got one sort of soil, one type, it's still complex. If you've got all the types and all the geographical locations, it's even more complex. So there's not a one size fits all. We're seeing benefits, lots of benefits, lower costs. We've also had some problems. We've also had lower yields. We've had drilling issues after cover crops. And it's not all positive, but we are going forward. Events like this are really valuable. Most of us are here to learn, not to teach as such. But we all want one thing. We want to improve our businesses, environment, our welfare, well-being, and we want good farming. Who would not want to be a good farmer? It's great. It's great that it's happened to me in my mid-50s that we've suddenly got this opportunity to be good farmers. Who wouldn't want that? This session's about financial performance, and that's in order to help us to address the question that was posed to us, is regen farming, can we afford not to do it? I'm very grateful to our panel, Gary Markham, Lizzie, Ecclestone, and Alec Smith. It's not pleasant standing up on stage, and I know they'll have put a lot of work into it, so I'm very grateful for that, on top of a busy day job. I've only said to them one thing. I'm rather mean, and if I go to something like this and pay 90 quid, I want value for money. So we want two things. We want take-home messages and good, honest numbers. That's all we can ask for, and I hope that we get that today. I'm going to let the speakers introduce themselves. What else are we going to say? The plan is for 3 relatively short presentations. Gary's going first, and Lizzie and Alec are going to do one together. They're only 7 minutes or so each. Then we go into questions. Pretty sure there'll be plenty of those. We want discussion. So most of today is about you. I'm going to ask the panel if they want to ask questions of each other before you have a go. And hopefully they will, but they don't have to. So please save your questions and any thoughts you have. Please do me a favour, because I was only given one instruction by Em, and she said, before anybody speaks, please make sure they've got the microphone, otherwise they won't be recorded. So I've got one for you too, and to the speakers. Please don't go on too long. We want lots of people involved, and that's only going to happen if you keep it short and succinct. And that's what I'm about to do. So Gary, you're first. Let's kick it off, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Paul, and good afternoon, everybody. So I've been presenting figures, benchmarking figures here for about 6 years now, and this is in the seventh year of Groundswell. And as Paul said, it started with 600 people, and we got 7,000 here today, which is really good. So that's the slide you see there is what we discussed, which was my talk last year. And does it make financial sense to do regen agriculture in the current economic climate that we had last year? And I think it's really good to add another 12 months on, and I'll be going through some numbers in a few minutes' time. So we've been benchmarking, as I said, for 7 years. So I'm going to look through some data, not data, information. Some information over the last 4 years to see what, on average, how the regen group we benchmark against our standard conventional farming clients. So land family business, we are accountants and strategic tax advisors. We only deal with agriculture, and we have many, up to 100,000 acres that we're involved with altogether. So hopefully you'll be able to see the numbers. Okay, next slide. And so we're starting off with the output. And so we've got Groundswell on the left, and LFB, which is land family business, which is our conventional farming group, on the right hand side. So this is the 19 to 22 harvests. So what we've done, we've actually listed all those over the last 4 years to try to get an average over that period. And so this is up to the 22 harvest, of course, up till now. So you can see that the Groundswell average is £340 a hectare less than the traditional farming. So one of the key points within this is that in the 21 and 22 harvests in particular, the actual conventional farming group have increased output substantially more than Groundswell. Groundswell group tend to be more resilient and steady, whereas, as you can imagine, with the prices we've had over the last couple of years, producing a few more tons, that has really boosted the output. So this is the start of the story. Okay, we're starting off with that slide, £340 a hectare, in brackets, where the Groundswell group was off by 340. So moving on to the next slide, which is the arable margin. And so we are looking here at the Groundswell group. We include livestock within the arable margin in the Groundswell because it forms part of the rotation, whereas in the standard conventional farming they do have livestock, of course, but it's not necessarily part of the equation. So you can see here where the arable margins are coming from 19 up to 22 on the two groups, and you can see the difference in the 22 harvest where LFB is substantially ahead based on the prices and yields that were achieved. So we've got an average difference here, including livestock, of 183, okay, and an arable difference of 206. So the livestock included in the Groundswell actually helps to bring it up a bit. Okay, so so now we'll move on. So that's that margin level. We're moving down the page. Okay, so we're into the very important part of labour and machinery, and we have at the bottom here a positive. So therefore, the Groundswell group have £129 per hectare difference better than conventional farming. So you've seen the negatives up to now, and then a positive at this stage. Okay, so then we move down to the actual margin itself. So the Groundswell margin itself is the next slide, which is the gross margin less the labour and machinery. So this is the bottom line as far as we're concerned at this stage, and this is where we benchmark. So this is basically, it's an element of an arable business, which is the arable part of both businesses, including the livestock in the Regen Ag group, the Groundswell group, and then we take off the relevant labour and machinery to the arable. So here we go at the margin, and so you can see the margins from 19 down to 22 on both, and the average difference is £97 per hectare less in the Regen group. Okay, so we've actually narrowed this down quite a lot, just to £97 a hectare. I think there's a couple of points we could make here. So £97 a hectare on average over the period is obviously negative, but it's very small negative. And at the moment, what we're going to think about doing is bringing some appropriate SFI payments that are relevant to Regen Ag. If you bring those into the equation, then then that 97 might be a bit different. So at the bottom of that page, you have got, however, so that is not the whole story. That's just the margin. One of the key points in farming and agriculture is the actual amount of capital required. And the amount of capital required in machinery in particular is very key. So in our conventional group at the moment, we've got machinery capital on average over £1,000 a hectare. Now, £1,000 a hectare tied up in machinery, and I don't know, we'll probably hear from how much you have in Century, but in our non-regen clients, they're up to over £1,000 a hectare tied up in capital equipment, which is £340 to £400 per acre in English. So total. So next slide, please. Yeah. So here we go. So this is the capital required. So the total variable costs for regen farming were £134 a hectare less. Machinery capital £161 per hectare less, which totals up to £295. So there's £295 per hectare across the whole regen farming, less capital required. Now that is quite substantial when you've got 1,000 acres or extra, when you build it up over the whole farm. The machinery capital per tonne. Now this is a benchmark that we have introduced and I've introduced here at Groundswell over the last 2 years, machinery capital per tonne, because the two key elements I think is the amount of machinery capital tied up versus the tonnes produced, because we got less machinery capital in regen and we got slightly less tonnes produced on average. So therefore machinery capital per tonne is £10 per tonne less. Now, when you look at machinery costs, you can calculate depreciation. Now, that depreciation is only on the amount of machinery you own. Okay, so you might not own all your machinery. You might use contractors, or you might hire tractors for a short period as well. So therefore, what we do to make it a true benchmark is to include depreciation, contract, and hire at the bottom there, so which I call access to machinery. So the access to machinery per hectare is £150 less. So I think that this slide here actually completely turns the previous slide on its head, where the margin was slightly less. If we add SFI payments, it'll probably be breaking even. So the conclusion is we're breaking even all the way through at the margin level, but when you take into account the working capital, which is a key part of a farming business with a 5% base rate at the moment, is very, very important. So, Mr. Chairman, the last slide. Okay, please. So the other thing we have been benchmarking over the last 2 years, and these are just fairly new figures here, is nitrogen, because there seems to be a lot of interest in nitrogen in terms of use of nitrogen, particularly the price it's been, of course. So winter wheat, so the GG is Groundswell Group, and then we've got LFB on the right. So we've got winter wheat per hectare, 164 versus 180. This is an average of a group of farmers, and per tonne it's about £20 per tonne on each. There's less tonnages in the Groundswell group, of course. And then we've just got spring oats there, 88 versus 115 per tonne, 22 and 18. And that's the end of my slide, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to say a few more words afterwards. Okay, so I will now hand over to these people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary. This afternoon, Lizzie and I are going to talk you through some experience Century have had on our regen journey, some of the financial impacts that these changes have had on our practices. First of all, for those of you who don't know who Century are a farming and consultancy business. We're based all over the UK. And we farm 23,000 hectares across the UK.
And as you can see on the map on the slide, just thought I'd show you the geographical locations of where we are. So we're in the east and along the south coast, predominantly where the arable areas are.
So as a company, we've laid out our ultimate ambitions for what we want to achieve on our journey. And that's to trial and integrate as many regen activities as we can across all of our sites over time. We want to work out what works on all of our unique sites, and we want to bring them into the business in a way that is both safe and profitable. So we've only got a really, really short amount of time to talk about a massive subject. So we're just going to focus in on 3 points that we think we're integrating onto all of our sites. And that's minimising soil disturbance, cover crops, and continually reducing our inputs. And now I previously stated that it was a slow journey, and it really is. And for us, that's okay. We're very aware that nothing's going to happen overnight. We want to trial, we want to test, and things may go wrong. But by slowing it down, at least we're hoping to minimise any impacts that might have happen on our bottom line. So minimising soil disturbance. This is something that as soon as you talk about, you instantly jump to perhaps direct drilling, minimum tillage, reducing your passes. But I just wanted to take a step back and look at what it is that's driving all the decisions that we're doing, and that is trying to gain a huge understanding of our soil. So what we're doing, especially on new farms, looking at new regen activities and looking at how our regen activities are going, is going out with our agronomist, spending a good day on the farm, digging some soil pits and really seeing what we've got to work with, if there are any problems, anything like that, and hopefully from there we're building a picture of things that we can start trialling, testing and start talking about.
Yeah, so gone are the days of recreational tillage. I can remember Joe probably remember Dad going out doing an extra pass. But the financial impact of reducing those passes is quite stark. Just by reducing sort of like a culti-press, will reduce your costs by £30 to £45 a hectare, depending on what the cultivation is, and that can be quite stark over quite big areas. And actually look at ways of, when we're doing the cultivations, how we can use weathering to help. And understanding the soil is really key to that. You can also go a step further and utilise a direct drilling system. So we've got a farm down in Dorset that's actually a full direct drilling system, and actually through doing that we've reduced our costs by over £100 a hectare. And actually from that we've actually seen increased yields through, because the soil there is right, it's very free draining, and it works well on that system. But it's all having the right system for the farm you've got. And also sharing kit. As everyone will tell you, going down a regen journey, it's all about having the right drill for the right conditions, and by getting access to those drills can be quite expensive. Capital outlay of drills can now be tens of thousands of pounds, up to £100,000. But by sharing that kit, we are reducing those costs, and also it's reducing those finance costs, especially with interest rates going up. Some of those finance costs on those bits of machinery now are going up quite quickly.
So cover crops for us is something that we are still very much in the trial phase of. We're trying to bring them in on all of our sites. We're just fine-tuning what mixtures are working. We're doing all sorts of mixtures really, from the wondrous designated plots of 12 species mix all the way through to the cheap and cheerful that really only have 2 or 3 different varieties within them. And we're putting these in front of our spring cropping of things like sugar beet, potatoes and spring barley. And we're finding, as expected, on the lighter soils, you've got lots of species coming through. You're getting really good cover. But on the heavier land, particularly heavy clays with lots of silts, you've only got 2 or 3 mixes that are kind of able to cope with those conditions. Whilst we're going through the journey, we're trying to maximise the grants where possible. SFI, Countryside Stewardship, water companies, they're all offering some financial help for getting started, which almost allows us just to go a little bit quicker, just so that we can test some larger areas. Just remember that there are some restrictions with these. So perhaps you've got to destroy your cover crop at a certain time, you've got to drill a certain amount. There's quite a few things to think about there. And then finally, utilising livestock. We're trying to bring livestock in across all of our farms. However, it is a bit of a battle for us, particularly with the things we're struggling with, mainly infrastructure and the investment that comes along with that, especially where we don't own some of the land. And also labour. Labour is quite hard to find at the best of times, let alone adding in a skill requirement for handling animals.
Yeah, cover crops. Many people can be put off by cover crops by viewing them as a sunken cost, especially where the improvement's not seen in the following crop. So we've tried to mitigate that. by various different ways. You can see here, direct drill cover crop will cost you circa £110 a hectare, which is quite a bit if you're doing over quite a large area. So what we've tried to do to offset that is trying to bring livestock in. So it's not seen as a sunk cost. We've got some farms where they're utilising a local shepherd and he's actually doing the land on a licence, which is bringing straight income in and there's no costs, or utilising hedgage payments. So essentially there's nomadic herds coming down from up north and west way, especially around East Anglia, and we've got some farms that are then having their cover crops grazed, helping with destruction and getting it readily available for the next crop. And if the cover crop's good enough, we'll offset some of that cost. There's obviously grants out there. There's countryside stewardship. There's a new SFI that was released this week, and the payments are £129 a hectare, so actually does offset that cost. And also there's water company grants out there in certain catchments. They're trying to reduce nitrate flow, but these do come with a heavy health warning because there are restrictions on when you can destroy them, and then can have further impacts on the following crop. So just make sure you get the right one for your situation, but try and look at ways to try and mitigate that cost. And there's also markets available for carbon, and those carbon markets are heavily driven by having cover crops in the rotation, and there's now payments up there. Some people are earning £35 a hectare across their whole farm by selling carbon.
Reducing and optimising inputs, and I think this one goes without saying. It doesn't matter where you farm or what you farm. This is something that we all want to achieve. So here are 3 quick things that we're looking at. Nitrogen use efficiency calculations. They're rolled out across the board, trying to find that happy spot between nitrogen efficiency and soil biology. And we're also going to start trialling some fertiliser recovery calculations. It's something new we're going to start looking at doing just to see how the crop's using that nitrogen. We're also utilising technology. I think this is something that previous generations really haven't had in their toolkit, and we need to take full advantage of. So yield maps, for instance, you've got a poor yielding spot on your farm, keeps yielding poorly every year, not really sure what's going on. Great space to go and dig a soil pit and see if there's anything underlying there. Variable rate technology is becoming more and more accessible for us now, and all of the online systems that can help us to do that. SOYL, Vorum, there's a lot of databases out there now that can help us to see what's going on. And also for Sentry, we are starting to trial robots, and we're doing a really large 150 hectare trial across Lincolnshire for drilling and spraying in the hope to reduce our inputs. And also regular monitoring of crops. I mean, this kind of goes without saying, but there's a lot of tools out there to assist. So you've got satellites out there showing your green area index. You've got the use of N testers, and there's also a lot of prediction tools, disease, pests, so you can see what's coming. And I think if you can be prepared and you can see what's coming, then we can adapt and be flexible. So rather than doing something across the board, we can look at things on a more field by field case.
Yeah, so what are the financial impacts we've seen by using these technologies available? I'm just going to really focus on one, which is the N-test or a chlorophyll meter. We've done some quite extensive trials in Norfolk last year, so we've got some quite good data on showing what the impacts are of using them. So essentially, we had up to savings of up to 50 kilos of nitrogen per hectare in trials last year, which was quite stark, especially in a year where fertiliser prices were starting to, and we knew what was coming this year. And the average was 30 kilos of nitrogen saved, which is about £55 a hectare, which is quite stark. And also, we didn't really see much reduction. We didn't see any reduction in yield. And then when we start looking at nitrogen use efficiency, the national average of nitrogen use efficiency is 65%, which is pretty poor, really. So 35% of the nitrogen that's going on is essentially going somewhere else. And they say that a good aim is 85%, and through the trials we averaged 92% nitrogen use efficiency, and up to 98% was achieved. So it's quite interesting and a good way to make sure we're using the nitrogen we're using properly and where it should be used. Sorry, it's quite hard with a clicker, notes, and a microphone. So what are our key learnings? I think the key learnings we've thought on our regen journey is make sure you focus on business profitability. We've all got to be, to definition of the business is something that's making money rather than just going on a journey and hoping it will do in 5 years' time. So that's something we always focus on. So part of that is making small changes rather than making a big change, and because there are mistakes along the way, and they do happen, especially when we make changes. But by making those little steps forwards, you're not making as catastrophic mistakes. And also try to look for opportunities to help offset those costs, whether it's utilising grants that are available, livestock coming onto the farm to help with that journey, or whether it's trying to get a grant for a drill to help offset that machinery cost that's coming through.
And then just a final slide to kind of summarise. I think we've said quite a lot about understanding your farm, understanding your soils, understanding your drainage, and being able to have all of that you're constantly reassessing to see how things are working, see how things are going, whether you need to try something different. We've also got that diversification for cropping, just being able to add in just even an extra crop if you can, where possible. Some of those costs, beans, for instance, aren't necessarily the most profitable crop, but there are some things that they can do that are fantastic for your soil that you might not directly be able to associate with profit. And think about countryside stewardship, SFI. There are some elements in there that if you're struggling to bring new cropping in, might be able to go into your rotation in some way. And there you've got a figure to work with so you can budget. And then finally, be driven by the bottom line. I think it's very well to go diving into regen, but at the end of the day, we are a business that have employees, clients, landowners that all rely on us. And I think the message there is to just go slowly, take your time, and make sure that you're happy that the decisions that you're making are right for you and your farm.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, very, very good. The speakers have done exactly what we asked them. They've absolutely kept to time. In a minute, it's going to be your opportunity to keep to time as well. So please bear that in mind when you are speaking. We do need some questions. We want to stimulate some discussion. I've got a question for Gary, so perhaps stick your hands up if you'd like to ask a question so that Em can get you the microphone in readiness. But I am going to ask Gary about his comments about capital. So Gary has said, actually, this year there's been a reduction in income, or lower than the baseline, but that there are huge advantages in terms of machinery. So I'm interested to know, Gary, how do we treat that machinery profit? Presumably you're selling kit, and in that year you sell kit, you're also carrying out less cultivations. So you've got a bit of a yin and a yang going on there. How do we deal with that from a tax perspective?
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, from a tax perspective in particular, this is really important, and I want to ask Alec a question on a similar note in a minute. It's the journey, I think, is the important bit that we need to be talking about, and that journey is so said can be 6 to 7 years. And I think that's what we're here to talk about, really, is managing that journey. So when you sell a piece of machinery and do not replace it, or you replace it with a less cost item, then which is downscaling the machinery that we have, as I said, in our conventional client base at the moment, lately is over £1,000 a hectare. So any downscaling on that machinery is a clawback of tax, because all the farmers get 100% annual investment allowances. You get 100% relief when you buy a piece of kit. So when you sell that piece of kit and not replace it, you get taxed on it. It just gets added to your taxable income. So you can see that if you have £1,000 a hectare, okay, and you've got to start this journey of 6 or 7 years to get down to well below that, you're going to be taxed on the way, and the tax rates can be either 20% or 40%, of course. But that is an actual cash cost, and that's something that we've been doing to manage that by other means. There are various ways of doing that. What you might call creative accounting, but there are various ways you do that to try to manage it. But there is a tax cost on the way, Paul. So. And so if I could ask Alec the question, so basically from a management perspective then, I guess if you've got clients moving from conventional across to regen or no-till and try to manage that, you've got to do some serious budgeting, I guess, including tax. And can the potential loss on the way be made up at the end? And this is the dilemma in my mind, and the dilemma in many of the talks, agronomy talks I give, where I hear farmers saying, I tried it, but I'm not going there. And so the question is, if you have got a tenant farmer with an overdraft, can he afford to go regen from conventional?
Probably not overnight. I think the first thing to understand is your soil. To make sure you get out there, dig the pit. Once you know your soil, make sure you get the right kit for how the soil is at the moment. You might have a pan in there that you might not realise is there. There might be, you might think everyone tells you to go and get a disc drill. Actually, a tine drill to start off with might be the right way to go. So yeah, get that plan in, and then start doing your budgeting, and then do your cash flow. Obviously, do some reduction in yield, but also try to look at ways to do it so that it's not a catastrophic change. So therefore, there isn't that massive decrease. It might have to do it over 10 years rather than try and do it over 5 years. Would be my advice.
And let's be honest. We have many clients. I have many clients now. I'm sure many of you have alternative incomes. So you might have solar panels. You might have particularly rental income coming in, which from a business perspective may not be the best thing to do, but buffers that. So we have many clients with rental income. That's something we've been pushing. Many clients now have replaced BPS already with commercial lets, the rental income. And so therefore you have got that buffer to help you on your way to get there. And that helps the cash flow, basically.
Right, thank you. Feel free to say who you are, where you're from, if you want to.
It's Andy Duff from Barclays. Gary, that was brilliant. That was really, really interesting. I just wanted to pick up on the margin slide that you have on the screen. And just noticing that in 2018 to 2019, actually that margin was pretty much level between Groundswell and LFG, and then much higher difference, £200 less in both 21 and 22, I think, yeah. And obviously that's due to the conventional output and margin that was much higher in those years. So just interested in that. And just a secondary question as well. So we hear a lot about sort of dip and pick up in terms of yield from transition to regenerative agriculture. That's obviously something that we as Barclays were interested in, potentially supporting farms around. Is that something that you have looked at all, have you examined at all?
Thank you. Yes. So to start, the margin point is really interesting, and conventional farming, and this is the conclusion we came to in this tent, whenever it was, in this show last year, when we discussed very similar points, is that conventional farming at that with the yields and a very good harvest and good prices just race ahead, and so you think, wow, we're way behind. But I think that the conclusion was last year we just stick with it and no knee-jerk reactions, and I think that was right. So your second point was. Which is what we spoke about. So within the Groundswell group, and I'm not sure if we've got anybody in the Groundswell group here. There was meant to be a couple here. I can't see any hands up, but there is there? Oh yeah, okay. So we've got one of our benchmarking group here, which would comment on this actually. So on this point, the key point is we've got 2 or 3 within our group that are well ahead of conventional farming in terms of output and in terms of actual margin. That's 2 or 3, but the 75% of them would be behind. So I think one of the key points is that we've been meeting up, doing workshops. Everybody's been to each other's farms, and we've learned how to do it. So it's a learning process within a peer group is so important. But the dip varies between farms, and it's probably something that my colleagues on the left could comment on. It may be on a soil type point particularly. So Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, can I ask Rob over there to say a couple of things? So Rob, you're in the group, and we'll get a microphone to you. Sorry, I'm not taking over. Only for a minute.
Oh, hi, Gary.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So on the dip and pick up, I mean, at home we started, it wasn't really called Regen Farming then, but direct drilling 15 years ago on the heaviest land. And at the time, the wheat yields were about 8.5 tonnes a hectare. And I think we sort of stabilised at that for a few years, probably when we went through that transition. And then Then they've picked up since then, and now they're sort of 10 plus in good years. So I think, as you said in the group, where it's going well, it's actually, can absolutely equal conventional farming. I think possibly the success rate depends a bit on the condition of the farm when it goes into this. Because if it's got a lot of drainage problems, a lot of weed problems, you're starting from a very difficult situation, and you've got no cultivation to hide behind.
Thank you. So the answer is within our group, the group we've got. We have people still struggling to get that yield up. Okay, but we have some people at 10 tonnes a hectare.
Okay, so if you go to Cedric at the back, and then to this lady here who's got her arm up in blue in the middle, please.
Thanks very much, Paul. Cedric Porter, covering for Farmers Guardian today. Really a question for Gary. Are you seeing a sort of blurring between your conventional group and your regen group, where the conventional group are looking more on that regen journey? And has that been exacerbated by high input prices and climate, and I suppose the change in support as well?
Yes, thank you. So I would say that on average, our clients, our conventional farming clients, are min tillers, basically, not no tillers, but min tillers. So they're reduced, thrown the plough away quite often. They have 2 or 3 drills, or at least 2 drills, if not 3 drills for different harvest periods, and they are on the journey. But I can the most progressive of our clients who are farming fairly large acreages, normally contract farming, so they have to perform, as you're all aware up here. They go about half to 3/4 of the way to regen and stop. And so basically they have very flexible systems, and that's where they start. That's where they stop. So there has been emerging, but most of our clients will not go the whole way, and they're increasingly looking at SFI obviously at the moment, which may be a point that pushes them over. But most of them have stopped on the way at that point.
If you're talking about transitioning from what's potentially a really bad soil and you're trying to improve it, it makes a big difference how bad the soil is when you start, I presume. So are there anybody taking any actions to improve the soil before they take the journey, like, for instance, adding biochar?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. I mean, by digging our soil pits, we've been finding lots of problems. Plough pans, for instance, seem to be a constant that we're coming up against. And actually, before we've even started our regen journey, we are getting rid of those mechanically to try and just make the transition a little bit easier, so that we don't go straight to direct drilling or straight to something and then see that drop in our yield, which will then affect our profits and bottom line. So I think there will need to be a slight overlap there, just as you're starting off with some of the tools we've got available conventionally.
One for Alec and Elizabeth. You mentioned livestock integration and how it can be quite difficult, especially with labour. It's something we've tried to do as a business over the last few years, and in an arable area, and it's not really worked that well. And we've looked at different ways of doing it, and the numbers make it hard to stack up, really. Obviously, you've got various different sites and different labour. Is there a model that you think you might try and follow to integrate livestock more, like have it as 2 separate or separate business entities and roaming flocks moving around the business, or any ideas on that front? Because it's quite a stumbling block, I think, in arable areas. We can see the benefit when we have livestock on the farm, but actually managing it well and making money out of it is, as we've talked about, this is the financial forum. Yeah, it's a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, in East Anglia, it is a struggle to get that livestock. Where we have used it quite well is having those roaming flocks that have come down, so that's helped. But in Leicestershire, we actually bought a flock and used it to graze them and then sold them off. We probably didn't do too well because we weren't very good in the sheep market, because we're not really very used to it. But it's constant learning curve to try and do that. But yeah, having it's a labour gap as well. Tractor drivers aren't too keen on looking after livestock, are they? which is quite difficult. Yeah, there's not suddenly a silver bullet that's going to solve it. It's going to be a gradual process, really.
So my experience of this is that we have quite a few now. Machinery syndicates, etc. Groups of farmers have got together, and not necessarily in Regen Ag, but they've got together, so they work as a team. So, and when you can offer a certain acreage, I'm very keen on helping young people getting into agriculture. So I would say, do not buy your own sheep, because there are two types of sheep: live ones and dead ones. So, or the third type, the other one is that they're in your neighbour's field. So don't buy your own sheep, but get a young person in to start off with 300 ewes or whatever, and guarantee them an area to lamb and guarantee them some grazing, and that works really well. Then you're not. All you're doing is providing them with a start in life, which I think is good, but also using the sheep, the flock, as a management tool.
Roger, that's good. Before you say that, you're always a very good source of take-home messages.
Oh gosh.
I think there's one coming.
I was going to ask a question. Can I ask a question first of Sentry? Thank you very much, Roger Davis, Indigo. Thank you very much for your presentation, really interesting. And I think one of the take-home messages here is that, we're all in this for food production and profitability. And from my point of view, I think starting with the right soils, and I echo all of the above. I'd just be really interested to know how you started down your transition route. Do you take 20% of the farm and try that? Do you grow cover crops and then spring crops? And how do you do that? And also, how do you incorporate, or how should we start thinking about SFI and stewardship built into that? And also carbon, because you mentioned carbon, but we're all very aware that there could be some money to be made with carbon as well. I'd just be interested to know where you are with that.
I think starting to bring it in on farm is incredibly unique. I mean, we've got so many different farms, and all of them have done different things, and they've all gone about it a different way. And I think a really big influencing factor for us as well is landowner interests. Where you've got the landowner on board, fantastic. You can really go, almost a bit quicker and a bit faster into it. But where you haven't necessarily got that support, we've got to be really careful that, again, we're not failing with our bottom line. It doesn't mean that we don't want to get there, just means we need to go about it in a little bit more of a cautious way. When we look at SFI and countryside stewardship, you've now got the funding for things like cover crop, bringing in your wild seed mixtures, rotational items. You've got a similar legume fallow mix, for example, in both stewardship and SFI now, that it's 2-year grass mix that you can rotate around your farm. So incorporating it in little ways like that. If you've got areas of the farm that are notoriously wet, boggy, and you really are struggling to get a grip of, you could put that into a countryside stewardship mix, for instance, something that just gives you a little bit of leeway whilst you're trying to test and find out what works for you. Do you want to do carbon?
Yeah, just to elaborate on countryside stewardship. I mean, we've gone into countryside stewardship in a heavy way. So I think 87% of our farms are in countryside stewardship. We've got 6 farms in the SFI pilot where countryside stewardship wasn't there. So that probably took them well over 95% of our farms were in some sort of stewardship, and a lot of the farms have gone into SFI. So we are trying to look at those ways to help mitigate that. Carbon, it's something we're constantly looking at. We haven't sold any carbon yet. Don't necessarily think potentially whether it's the right thing yet. You probably tell me something different, but essentially we are constantly looking at it, and we have clients looking at it. So from the consultancy side of the business that Lizzie and I are involved with quite heavily, we have got clients looking at it and are selling carbon, but we haven't done it on any of our farms yet.
There's a guy at the back with his hand up. Can I ask, we've only got 15 minutes, can you really get through it, rattle through it and rattle through it? Thank you. We'll get a couple more questions in.
Right, thank you. Hello, Anthony Magnell. I'm the MP for South Devon. Can I just ask water companies, how proactive are they, and how much can you actually plan around them being able to support what you're doing? That's specifically to Alec and Elizabeth.
Yeah, so water company-wise, actually, I've kind of had to go out in search of some of the information. Normally we get approached or there's something online, but actually I've had to quite dig to find contact that's been able to give us some information. Since I found that contact, actually we've got quite a lot of help and support, building a little bit of a relationship there, and there seems to be quite a few things coming through. I mean, there's the money for cover cropping at the moment, and there's also some things coming through to help with training and just helping with education. So I'm hoping that now I'm in a bit of a position where I know who to go to, and we've got a bit of a relationship there. It'll be a bit easier going forward. But Lady in blue. Yeah.
Thank you. Annabelle Martin, West Country Rivers Trust. Given the weather we've had for the last couple of years, are you able to measure or even just take anecdotal reference to crop response across the different systems, different farms, in terms of drought and things like that? Are you seeing a difference between the regen and the conventional?
Yeah, it builds resilience in by having the regen, having the extra organic matter going in, and we are noticing that difference. Last year we were quite surprised at where our yields were from such a dry year, actually quite well above budget in quite a lot of cases, and especially with spring crops where you have had that cover crop, you do actually notice a bit more difference because there's a bit more water holding capacity there.
Henry Matthews, Writtle University College. Do you anticipate getting a premium for your regen crops or livestock? You know, is there a future in getting a premium and raising your output in that way?
Well, we haven't come across anything yet, and there are some things, so you can do that for not necessarily a regen, but from a carbon perspective. ADM have some contracts at the moment from doing just monitoring your carbon, but I think in the future, but I think eventually, by the time it's got there, we'll all be pretty much on that journey anyway to try and differentiate it.
I think that's a really good question, and it's something I've been passionate about and talking to Groundswell about for a long time. There was a session this morning about branding regen, which was quite interesting in the tent up here. So I think there's a huge opportunity to have regen loaves on the shelves, or Groundswell loaves on the shelves. In my case, been involved here for so many years. How we make that step, I don't know, but I think it's something there's a huge opportunity there. So we need some fresh people in, if you like, with a fair bit of money to try to drive that forward. And I think. Yeah, absolutely. Wild Farm are doing it, and I'm fully aware because obviously Wild Farm is partly involved here. Yeah, with Harriet. So they are doing it really well. Absolutely, that's a very good example. Yeah.
My name is Penny White. I work with Martin & Company Chartered Accountants. I wonder what opportunity there might be for banks to offer a discount on their lending rates to regen farmers, because that would really make a difference, wouldn't it? Especially when you're in that transition period of you get 1% less above your base rate than if you're conventional farming, because after all, you're saving the planet here.
Perhaps we could refer back to our first questioner. He may have a view on that.
You're sorry,
Would
you
like
said
a
that
microphone?
Now.
Well, I'll get out of it by saying it's too early to say, but I think there is a different way of looking at it, which we do have actually a product which is available at the moment called a rural project loan, which allows you to go interest only for the first couple of years before then going to capital and repayment. So that's why I was asking the question about the dip and pickup, because that's the way we're sort of looking at it. An absolute discount is a different thing. That's really, I suppose, that falls into more broadly sustainability-linked lending, and the question with that is about measurement. And at the moment, we don't feel that the measurement is accurate enough for us to commit to one particular measurement system, if you like. So it's a really tricky area. I've been talking to DEFRA about it. We know that DEFRA is trying to harmonise the tools around measurement of carbon, but measurement of actually how you would measure improvement in regen and offer a discount is a different thing. I hope that is comprehensive enough for anyone, but just if anyone wants to talk to me about it, I'm quite happy to do so.
Thank you. My name's Martin Hanson. I'm the head of agriculture for HSBC. So to answer the previous question, yeah, I absolutely do think there is an argument for preferential terms for farmers that are looking to make this transition, and we're currently working on a potential solution. if the panel have got any suggestions about other ways we could rethink our lending, restructure our lending that would help the transition, I'd be really interested in hearing them.
Rachel Jeffries, farmer. I'm interested in your idea of roaming flocks. We have 1,000 acres. We allow neighbouring farmers to bring their sheep on to graze off herbal lays, which we use for water companies. Discuss, please. And particularly the prices, if you, to your earlier point, good, honest numbers.
Do you want to come and see me afterwards? I'll go through it with you. Be easier. Yeah.
No, I haven't got time.
Okay. Yeah, well, it all depends on the quality of the stock and, the quality of the food and what demand there is in the area. So some places we're getting up to 30 to 40 pea hedges rates, per week.
Hi, Louise MP, Farmers Weekly. Changing tack slightly. Alec, I think you said you average 92% nitrogen use efficiency. Yep. Can you expand on that a bit, please? How did you do that? How did you do that?
Yeah. So basically, nitrogen use efficiency. So essentially, up to 92%. So say we put on 100 kilos of nitrogen, we're taking 92 kilos off in the food in the crop. Yeah. So basically, we're only losing 8 kilos.
It's quite frightening what the average is.
Yeah.
What was it? It was
65%.
65% efficiency is really frightening, isn't it?
I'd like to just ask someone who's helped us on our soil journey, is Philip Wright. He's somewhere here. Philip, I wonder, Philip, if you would just give us a bit of your wisdom on, for someone in the room perhaps who's not started yet and doesn't know where to start, because there's a number of those, I'm sure. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm conscious of the time limit and being succinct and you needing take-home messages. Apologise for my voice. I think the messages given by the panel and the questions by the audience and findings by the audience actually mirror mine, my clients, very closely. And I think there are some clear things with understand your soils, number one, not just their texture, very important their texture, but also where they are in the journey as well, because that will determine how quick you can start to pull the levers. If you've been ploughing and power harrowcombing for many years, taking all the straw off, it's a bit different to if you've been halfway to min-till for a number of years, putting some muck back, for example. So I think you've got to understand that. That's 100% right. Understand and max out your drainage is the most important thing. It's very difficult to min-till poorly drained soils. And I know that's a challenge if you don't own your ground, but where I'm coming from really is if you've got under drainage, make sure you've got your outfalls clear and the ditch is deep enough and you can see water coming out the outfalls. It's often as simple as that. If you can max that out, then you're going to go a long way to achieving what you want. And I think the final point really, in terms of if you can maintain yield, we aren't looking for record-breaking yields here, we're looking to try and maintain it. The gentleman over there is maintaining his yield. We then got halfway to Gary's solution straight away if we can maintain those yields. Yields are associated with growing good root systems on crops. If you've got barriers to root systems, fix them. Fix them first if you can. Fix it for the cover crop. Might be a tine drill is all you need to fix a barrier. It might not be that deep. Enough?
I know you could go on all afternoon, but that is enough. Thank you very much. We've got time for one more. Behind you with the glasses.
Hi there, Ben Bates, Series Rule. Just a quick question for Gary. It's really interesting to see the figures. Those are obviously average figures. I wondered if you could talk to maybe a top 25% comparison and a bottom 25% comparison.
Yes, thank you. So the reason why I had 4 years average figures was to try to get the trend, because looking at 1 year in particular you can't make conclusions because of the differences, as we said. I do have top 25 and average and bottom 25 as well, actually. So I think I haven't got them with me, but I have a stand a few hundred yards up there where I have all the information. So if anybody wanted to come, I have a handout of more details than we've given here today. Handout at the stand if anybody wants to more details. But I think the key point is I've been benchmarking conventional farming since 1992, which is quite a long time. And I've always been amazed at the difference between the top 25, the average, and the bottom 25. Well, between the top 25 by definition and the bottom 25. Huge range in performance. And it's not soil type, it's due to management. Very much, and so and just to finish off on the point where you do get these differences, it's basically to be honest, it's dysfunctional families. So if you have a family that do not get on, and out of my clients, I would say more than half of them don't get on. And if you have a problem within the family, because it's mainly family farms, problem in the family, you're in the bottom 25%. So and that's the reality, I'm afraid. You know, you can look at all the science, you look at everything, but if father and son or father and daughter are not getting on at all, then the farm is not profitable. So which is very, very difficult to get out of. So in summary, the people in the bottom 25% are usually having a row in the family.
Well, thanks, Gary, for leaving us on that note. But I would say that probably sums up where we are. The problem's either going to be soil or people. But thank you ever so much. Look, we've run out of time. I can't run through my take-home messages, but I really genuinely hope you've managed to take some away. And I'd like to thank the panel, and I'd like to thank you, because actually we got through a lot more questions than I thought we would, and that's because you didn't mess about. So please could we thank the panel in the normal way.